What if I told you that the biggest political idea of the 21st century may not come from Washington? It may not come from Beijing. It may not even come from Brussels. It could come from Delhi. And it would not be the product of the election slogans or economic graphs. It would not be born from the left or the right. It would come from something older than capitalism, older than socialism, older than even the nation state itself. It would come from Dharma. Here's the thing, the West is locked in a cultural war between woke and nationalist. China is selling a model of control and obedience. But India doesn't have to choose between individual and freedom and collective order. It doesn't have to choose between faith and law. Why? Because we already have a civilizational grammar for balance. We already have a framework where diversity doesn't mean division and unity doesn't mean uniformity. That framework is what I call Dharmocracy. In this episode, we are going to step far beyond the news cycle. We are going to explore a vision for India's role in the world, not just as a superpower, but as a civilizational anchor. We will talk about how Dharma, Rajya, and Samvidhan, the moral compass, the art of governance, and the constitutional structure, together form a strategic trinity no other country has. How India's constitution could be our most valuable export in a fractured world, and how by 2047, even by 2100, India could lead not by force but by framework. And before we end, I'm going to share something special. First, look at a Dharmocracy white paper. So take a deep breath, step outside the West versus China narrative, and imagine an India whose greatest power is not its army, not its market, but its idea. Let's start our episode on the Dharmocracy vision, India at 100 and the New World Order. The future is not Western, it's Dharmic. The future is not Western. The future is not authoritarian. The future is Dharmic. Now let's pause on that word, Dharmic. For some, it might sound ancient, but others spiritual. For others, still political. But I want to start by telling you this. Dharmic governance is not a relic of the past. It's not a museum piece. It's not an abstract philosophy locked away in dusty scriptures. It is living, breathing framework for running a society in a way that is both morally grounded and strategically adaptable. And here's what even more remarkable. India already has it. We have been running on it, quietly, often without calling it by its real name. Now let's move into the false binary, what the world thinks it must choose. For decades, the world has been told there are only two main models for how to organize a nation. Model 1, the Western liberal order. It promises freedom, individual rights, equality before the law. It builds institutions that protect dissent. It celebrates openness and choice, but it has a blind spot. It often forgets that freedom without responsibility becomes fragility. It struggles when social trust breaks down. It finds it hard to keep communities together when everyone pulls only for themselves. Model 2 is the authoritarian order. This promises unity, speed, and decisive action. It says one leader, one party, one vision. It keeps things in line, but here's its blind spot. It crushes diversity, creativity, and sometimes even dignity. It trades the soul of a nation for the stability of the state. And in the 21st century, both of these systems are showing cracks. The West is paralyzed by culture wars. The authoritarians are trapped in a fear of their own people. So if you are a young country or a diverse society, what are your opinions? Do you choose liberty and risk chaos, or choose order and risk suffocation? The truth is, that's a false choice. Now let's move into the third way, Dharmocracy. India offers a third way. We have been living it for thousands of years in a civilizational ethos, and for the last 75 years in our constitutional structure, I call it Dharmocracy. A fusion of three pillars: Dharma, the moral compass; Rajya, the machinery of governance; Samvidhan, the constitutional framework. Think of it as a trinity. If Dharma is the compass, Rajya is the ship, and Samvidhan is the map. Without Dharma, the ship loses direction. Without Rajya, the ship never moves. Without Samvidhan, the ship sails blindly into a storm. Democracy says rights matter, but duties hold them in place. It says diversity isn't a problem to be solved, it's an asset to be nurtured. It says The state is strong but not absolute. Society is free but not unbounded. Let's move into why this matters for the world. Let me be blunt, the 21st century is not going to be a replay of the 20th. The Cold War was fought between capitalism and communism. The next global context will be between fragmentation and cohesion. The countries that survive will not be the richest. They will be the ones that can hold themselves together while still staying open to the world. And who has done that better than India? We have over 1.4 billion people. We speak hundreds of languages. We practice every major religion on earth. We have every possible ideology, every possible political leaning inside one national family. And yet, we vote, we argue, we protest, we compromise, and somehow the system holds. This is not luck, this is design. It is constitutional dharma in action. Now let's move into how India's constitution is already dharmic. People forget a constitution wasn't just borrowed from Britain or copied from America. It was engineered for our realities. We took the parliamentary model, yes. We adopted judicial review, yes. But we also built in safeguards for minorities, protection for cultural freedoms, and flexibility for a young state to shape its own destiny. Articles 25 to 30, that's legal pluralism in practice. It says you can follow your faith, run your own institutions, protect your culture, and still be fully Indian. The directive principles, that's dharma in legal language. They don't force the government to act one way, but they remind it what the ultimate moral purpose of governance is. A federalist structure, that's Rajya in balance, central enough to protect the union, local enough to allow diversity. This is why, unlike the French model, we don't demand that religion vanish from public life. And unlike the American model, we don't let religion dominate politics unchecked. We have built a system where multiple identities can coexist without tearing each other apart. Let's move into replacing woke versus nationalist. Now let's address the elephant in the room. Globally, and even in India, political debate is stuck in another false binary, woke versus nationalist. The woke side talks about inclusion, equality, and social justice. Good goals, but too often it forgets culture roots, tradition, and shared duties. The nationalist side talks about pride, heritage, and sovereignty. Good values, but too often it forgets compassion, openness, and minority security. Dharmocracy says stop treating these as opposites. They are halves of the same whole. A tree needs both deep roots and wide branches. Without roots it falls, without branches it withers. Our politics and our world needs the same balance. Why the world will need dharmocracy by 2047 or 2100? By the time India celebrates 100 years of independence in 2047, the global order will be in flux. We will see more religious mixed societies, more climate refugees, more identity clashes, more attempts at secession. Western liberalism will still offer rights. Authoritarianism will still offer control, but neither will offer cohesion without oppression. That is where dharmocracy steps in, and by 2100, I want this idea to be as widely understood as democracy or human rights is today. Imagine an African nation designing its constitution and calling New Delhi, not Washington or Beijing, for advice. Imagine an Asia trade bloc adopting the Dharmic principles of duty before rights. Imagine peace negotiations in the Middle East being brokered using India's constitutional pluralism as the template. That's the scale of what's possible. Now let's move into the civilizational mission. The West had its century. The authoritarian states are having their decades. But the civilization that can hold unity in diversity without crushing one or abandoning the other is the one that will lead the next 100 years. That civilization is ours. That framework is ours. That future can be ours. If we choose it, we teach it, if we live it. That's Dharmocracy. That's India at 100. I am Amod Vidhudi, and this is not just a constitutional theory, it is a civilizational mission. We will meet again in the next hearing. Thank you.